I didn't find out my husband planned to leave me with nothing in a dramatic way. There was no shouting, no suspicious lipstick stains, no late night phone calls that screamed betrayal. It was quiet. Too quiet. The kind of quiet that creeps up on you when the person you trust most has already made a decision, and you're the last one to know. We've been married for 11 years. 11 years of routines, shared bank accounts, inside jokes, and the kind of comfort that makes you believe. Stability means safety. I thought we were solid. Not perfect, but real. So when Mark started acting distant, I told myself it was work stress. When he stopped asking about my day, I told myself marriages go through phases. And when he began guarding his phone like it contained state secrets, I told myself I was overthinking. That's what women like me do. We explain things away. We give the benefit of the doubt. Until one day, the doubt shows up with proof. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. Mark had left his laptop open on the dining table while he rushed out to take a call. I wasn't snooping. I swear I wasn't. I was just going to move it so I could. Set down a grocery bag. That's when I saw the folder, post-divorce financial plan. My heart dropped so fast I thought I might faint. I stood there staring at the screen, my mind scrambling for excuses. Maybe it was hypothetical. Maybe it was a template. Maybe it had nothing to do with us. But my name was in the file. My full legal name. I clicked. And in that moment, the marriage I thought I had shattered. There were spreadsheets, asset breakdowns, timelines, notes from a lawyer, and one sentence burned into my brain. Ensure minimal financial exposure to spouse. Spouse, not wife. Not partner. Spouse. I scrolled in silence, my hands shaking. The house we lived in listed under his name. The savings account calculated in a way that cut my contribution almost in half. My small inheritance from my grandmother categorized as non-essential. I felt sick. Not just because he planned to divorce me, but because he planned to leave me with nothing. I closed the laptop just as Mark walked back in, laughing into his phone. "Yeah, Thursday works," he said, then paused. When he saw me, "Hey, everything okay?" I looked at the man I had built my life around and smiled. "Yeah," I said softly, "everything's fine." That night, I lay next to him in bed, staring at the ceiling while he slept peacefully. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made, every time I supported his career, every time I chose us over myself, and while he slept, I made a decision. I wasn't going to confront him. I wasn't going to cry. I wasn't going to beg if he thought I was going to be the clueless wife he could outmaneuver. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The next morning, I woke up early and made breakfast like nothing had changed. Eggs, coffee, toast. I kissed him goodbye and wished him luck at work. Then, as soon as his car disappeared down the street, I opened my laptop. I started with our finances. Joint accounts, investment portfolios, property records. I printed everything. Every transaction, every balance, every digital trail he thought I'd never follow. By noon, I realized something that made my chest tighten, not with fear, but with clarity. A lot of what we had wasn't actually his, the business he loved to brag about. Seeded with money from my inheritance, the emergency fund, mostly built from my freelance income during the years I worked from home to support his schedule. The house renovations, paid for by my bonuses. Mark had assumed something dangerous. He assumed love made me blind. He assumed silence made me weak. That afternoon, I called an old friend, Claire. She was a financial consultant, sharp as a blade. I need advice. I told her, quiet advice. She didn't ask questions. She just said, "Come over." When I showed her the documents, she exhaled slowly. "He's been planning this for months," she said. "And he's counting on you not protecting yourself. What do I do?" I asked. She looked at me, eyes steady. You move first. That sentence changed everything. Within 48 hours, I had opened a new account in my maiden name. I transferred my personal funds legally. I secured my inheritance under a trust Mark couldn't touch. I photographed valuables and moved them to a safe deposit box. Every move was calm, legal, silent. At dinner, Mark chatted about work like a man who believed the future was under his control. I nodded, smiled, and listened. Inside, something had shifted. I wasn't scared anymore. I was awake. 3 days later, I overheard him on the phone in his office. I just need to make sure everything's lined up before I drop the papers, he said casually. She won't expect it. I stood in the hallway, my heart pounding, but not from panic, from certainty, because I already knew something he didn't. He thought he was leaving me with nothing, but 1 week from now, he would regret everything. Asterisk, once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. Every word Mark spoke after that felt rehearsed. Every smile felt calculated. It was like watching a play where I finally had the script, and suddenly all his lines made sense. He became nicer. That was the first sign. He brought home flowers on a random Thursday. Asked if I wanted to take a weekend trip. Even offered to help with dinner, something he hadn't done in years. To anyone else, it would have looked like effort. To me, it looked like guilt management. He was softening the ground before the fall. I played along. I thanked him for the flowers. I smiled at his jokes. I leaned into his shoulder while we watched TV, pretending I didn't know that the man next to me was actively planning my financial erasure. At night. While he slept, I worked. I documented everything, every late night call, every unexplained withdrawal, every email notification that popped up on his tablet because he forgot to log out. One name kept appearing. Elaine Porter. At first, I assumed she was the lawyer, but the messages weren't legal. They were personal. Short, familiar, intimate in a way that had nothing to do with paperwork. Can't wait until this is over. Soon we won't have to hide. She still doesn't know, right? I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I took screenshots. That weekend, Mark told me he had a work conference out of town. I helped him pack. Even reminded him to bring the blazer he liked. The moment he left, I called Claire again. It's worse, I said quietly. There's someone else, she sighed. I suspected as much. I don't want revenge, I told her. I want protection. And control, she added gently. Yes, I said, that too. She helped me review everything again. And that's when we found it, the detail Mark had overlooked. His biggest mistake, the business account. He'd been moving money out of our joint savings and labeling it as business reinvestment. Small amounts at first, then larger ones. He assumed I wouldn't notice or wouldn't understand, but the paper trail was clear. He wasn't just planning to divorce me. He was trying to hide assets before doing it. That's when Claire said the words that made my spine straighten. If he files now, she said, you could walk away with more than half. I blinked. How? Because he violated disclosure rules before the divorce even began. I leaned back, exhaling slowly. So this was no longer about survival. This was about leverage. On Monday morning, Mark came home looking energized, relaxed, like a man who believed his future was secured. We had breakfast together. I might be traveling more in the next few weeks, he said casually. Things are shifting at work. I nodded. Sounds exciting. He smiled. It is. New beginnings. I almost laughed. Instead, I said, whatever makes you happy. That night, he stayed up late in his office. I passed by quietly and heard his voice through the door. I'll file next week, he said. Everything's ready. She won't fight it. She's not that type. Not that type. I went to bed with a calm I didn't recognize. The next morning, I met with a lawyer, not to confront Mark, not to threaten him, not to prepare. The lawyer was thorough, sharp, unemotional in the best way. "You're ahead of him," she said after reviewing the documents, "and he doesn't know it." "What happens if I wait?" I asked. She smiled faintly. "Then he walks straight into his own mess." So I waited. 2 days later, Mark suggested we separate temporarily. "I just need space," he said, sitting across from me at the kitchen table. "It doesn't mean anything permanent." I looked at him, searching his face for something. "Real. Of course," I said gently. "Take all the time you need." Relief washed over him. That was the moment I knew. He thought I was already letting go. That night, while he packed a bag, he didn't notice me moving the last of my important documents into my car. He didn't see me photograph the contents of the safe. He didn't hear the quiet click of the deposit box closing behind me at the bank. By the time he drove away, he believed he had the upper hand. He believed the story he'd written. What he didn't know was that every move he made now was being recorded, counted, prepared for 3 days later. The divorce papers arrived. I accepted them calmly, signed nothing, and smiled to myself, because 1 week after he thought he'd leave me with nothing, he was about to realize how badly he'd miscalculated. Asterisk, the divorce papers arrived on a Friday morning. No warning. No conversation. No dignity. Just a courier at the door with an envelope thick enough to carry 11 years of marriage inside it. "Are you Mrs. Harris?" he asked. "Yes," I said calmly. "You've been served." I thanked him, closed the door, and leaned against it for a moment. Not because I was weak, but because something inside me had finally snapped into place. This was it, the moment Mark had been planning for months. I opened the envelope slowly, scanning page after page. His requests were bold, aggressive, almost insulting. He wanted the house. He wanted primary access to the accounts. He wanted me to vacate within 30 days. And under spousal contribution. He listed my role as minimal. I smiled, not because it was funny, but because it was proof. Proof that he believed his own lie, that I had been a passenger in my own life. I didn't call him. I didn't text. I called my lawyer. "Now?" She asked. "Yes," I said. "Now." We met that afternoon. She reviewed the petition with a raised eyebrow. "He's either arrogant," she said, "or desperate." "Both," I replied. She nodded. "Good news is, his arrogance just handed. Use leverage." We filed our response on Monday. Not emotional. Not reactive. Strategic. It included documentation of hidden transfers, misuse of joint funds, and evidence that the business he claimed as solely his had been built using marital assets, my assets. When Mark got the notification, he came to the house unannounced. He stood in the doorway like a stranger. "What did you do?" he asked. I closed my laptop slowly. Responded. "You accuse me of financial misconduct?" He snapped. "Are you trying to ruin me?" I looked up at him calmly. "No, I'm just telling the truth." "You had no right." I had. "Every right," I interrupted. "You plan to leave me with nothing." I simply chose not to cooperate. His face changed. For the first time, I saw fear. "You were supposed to sign," he said quietly. "You weren't supposed to fight." I stood. "You should have thought about that before lying to me." He laughed bitterly. "You think this makes you powerful?" "No," I said. "I think this makes me informed." He left without another word. The next few days were chaos for him. His lawyer called mine repeatedly, pushing for a settlement. My lawyer declined. Discovery had begun, and Mark's financial history was being examined in ways he hadn't anticipated. Every transfer, every email, every business expense. And then came the audit. Mark's company initiated an internal review after discrepancies surfaced. It wasn't criminal yet, but it was enough to shake his confidence. I found out through a mutual acquaintance who didn't realize I wasn't supposed to know. He looks exhausted, they said, like someone pulled the ground out from under him. Double quotes, good. One evening, he called me. Please, he said, let's talk. We met at a neutral place, a quiet cafe. He looked older, smaller. I didn't want it to be like this, he said. We could have handled this privately. You didn't want it like this, I replied calmly. You wanted it easy. He clenched his jaw. I didn't think you'd notice. That's the part that hurts the most, I said. Not the divorce, the assumption. He stared at his hands. Who is she? I asked quietly. He flinched. It's not serious. That's not what I ask, he sighed. Elaine, I nodded. I know. Silence fell between us. She thinks you don't know, he added. I'm sure she does. When we stood to leave, he said something that made me stop. I never thought you'd be like this. I turned back to him. You never thought I'd be capable. That night, I slept better than I had in months, because the fear was gone. In its place was something steadier. Respect for myself. By the end of the week, my lawyer called. He's in trouble, she said, and he knows it. What happens next? She smiled. Now he learns what happens when you underestimate the person who built half your life. Once the truth starts leaking, it never stops at one crack. It pours in from every direction. Mark stopped pretending after that cafe meeting. The charm disappeared. The carefully constructed calm shattered. What replaced it was desperation raw. An unfiltered. He began calling more often, not to reconcile, not to apologize. To negotiate. I'll give you the house, he said during one call. We can split the savings evenly. Let's just end this before it gets worse. I listened quietly, letting him talk himself into circles. You should have started there, I replied, before you tried to erase me. He hung up. 2 days later, the affair exploded into the open. Elaine didn't plan to reveal herself. She didn't need to. The stress did it for her. She showed up at Mark's office during business hours, angry, loud, careless. Someone took photos, someone talked, and within 24 hours, the rumor reached the very people Mark had worked years to impress. The board requested a formal explanation. The internal audit expanded. Suddenly, the man who once walked into rooms with confidence was being asked to justify his every decision. He came to the house late one night, unannounced again. I never meant to hurt you, he said, standing in the doorway like a man begging to be let back into a life he'd already burned down. You plan to, I replied calmly. That's worse. He ran a hand through his hair. Elaine's gone. She left when things got hard. I didn't respond. I lost the account, he added. The one that mattered. Still nothing? You're enjoying this, he accused. His voice breaking. I finally looked at him. No, Mark, I'm surviving it. He sank onto the couch. I didn't think you had this in you. I nodded slowly. You weren't paying attention. The court hearing arrived sooner than expected. It wasn't dramatic. No shouting. No slam GAVELS. Just facts. Cold, undeniable facts. My lawyer presented the evidence methodically. The hidden transfers. The misuse of joint funds. The business expenses tied to personal indulgences. Mark sat silently as his own paper trail spoke for him. When the judge looked up, there was no sympathy in his eyes. Mr. Harris, he said, your actions suggest intentional financial concealment. Mark swallowed hard. The ruling was swift. He would retain the business, but reimburse the diverted funds in full. He would surrender the house. He would cover legal costs, and most importantly, the record would reflect misconduct. That detail mattered more than money. Outside the courtroom, Mark stopped me. You've taken everything, he said quietly. I met his gaze. No, I took back. What was mine? He shook his head. I loved you, I paused. You loved what I gave you? Then I walked away. That night, alone in the house that was finally mine, I sat on the floor with my back against the wall and let myself breathe. Not cry dot, breathe dot. The fight was over, and I had won not by destroying him, but by refusing to let him destroy me. 1 week later, everything changed. Asterisk 1 week after the settlement was finalized, I woke up in a house that felt different, not because the furniture had moved, not because the walls had changed, but because the weight was gone. For the first time in years, I didn't wake up wondering if I was doing enough, giving enough, being enough for someone else. The silence wasn't heavy anymore. It was clean, earned. I made coffee and stood by the kitchen window, watching the morning light spill across the floor. This house had witnessed my doubt, my loyalty, my patience, and now it witnessed something new. Peace. The world didn't end after the divorce. It didn't collapse. It expanded. Mark disappeared from my daily life almost immediately. His messages slowed, then stopped altogether. Not because he'd healed, but because he had nothing left to say. Elaine was gone. The job he risked, everything. FOR was under review. Friends who once praised his ambition now avoided his name. And me? I was finally invisible to the chaos. Claire came by that afternoon with a bottle of wine. You look lighter, she said, handing me a glass. I am, I replied. She smiled. Most people think winning looks loud. Yours looks quiet. That's because it's real, I said. Later that evening, I found a letter in the mailbox. No return address, but I knew the handwriting. I debated opening it, then I did. I didn't understand what I was losing until it was gone. You were the only steady thing in my life, and I mistook that for weakness. I hope one day you forgive me, not so I can feel better, but so you can be free. I folded the letter slowly, not with anger, not with sadness. With closure. I placed it in a drawer and closed it, knowing I'd never need to read it again. The following Monday, I changed my name back to the one I had before I gave pieces of myself away, and with it, I started something new. A small consulting practice, nothing flashy. Just me, helping others protect themselves before they're forced to learn the hard way. Women came to me with stories that sounded painfully familiar. I trusted him. I didn't think he'd do this. I thought love would be enough. And every time I told them the truth I'd learned too late, love is not protection. Awareness is. Sometimes late at night, I thought about Mark not with bitterness, but with clarity. He thought he was leaving me with nothing, but what he actually did was give me everything. My independence, my voice, my power. Revenge didn't come from taking from him, it came from no longer needing him at all. And that's the kind of victory no one can ever take away.